doing okay? So this is lesson 3 of our topic, the circle of life. As a starter activity, so we've got this pause symbol, which by now you know means we're going to be pausing this slide. Okay, so you've got a starter activity here. You're going to fill in the gaps. You've got a word bank down the bottom. But remember, we're not expecting you to write everything out because you've still got that written phase at the end. So you can just have a think about it, work them out in your head. Okay, no need to write them down. So have a read through and fill in the right answers and pause the slide now. Okay, so let's talk through this. What you should have had is there are millions of living organisms in the world. Scientists sort living things into different groups so that they can recognize them more easily. Okay, this is called classification. Okay, so this process of putting things into groups is called classification. Scientists have put things into groups according to the number of features they have in common. So think about big cats, for example. They've got lots and lots of things in common, okay, which is why they all go into one group. So how do we classify animals? So all animals are grouped into one big classification called the animal kingdom. Okay, so this is the overall group that contains all of the animals. It distinguishes them from other kingdoms of living things. So there are other living organisms such as plants, fungi, okay? Putting all animals into this big group distinguishes them, okay? It shows that they're different from species within those other groups. So within the animal kingdom, there are many other groups we can put species in according to their features. So like I said about big cats, that's a group of its own, okay? You can tell by their features that they're different from, think about canines, for example. So you've got dogs, wolves, okay? They've got similar, they look similar, they're in groups according to their features. So some of these groups are vertebrates and some are invertebrates, okay? So what do we mean by vertebrates and invertebrates? So the two main groups, vertebrates and invertebrates. Vertebrates are animals that have a spinal cord. So obviously humans come into that classification. Most household pets will come into the vertebrates classification, okay? Then animals that don't have a spinal cord, okay, they're invertebrates. So if they do have a spinal cord, they're called vertebrates. If they don't have a spinal cord, they're invertebrates, okay? So, see this pause symbol? So that's going to be an activity, okay? So how do we classify vertebrates? So animals with a backbone, how do we group them? So the main groups are mammals, fish, reptiles, amphibians, and birds. So what I want you to do now, have a quick think. Can you think of examples of animals that come into each of these groups? Okay, so you've probably heard these words around before. Have a think. Can you think of any animals that come into these groups? So if you pause the slide now. Okay, so for mammals, you could have had cats, dogs, foxes, lions, elephants, okay? Fish, you could have said goldfish, tuna, sharks, okay, anything along those lines. Reptiles are things like lizards and turtles. Amphibians are frogs and toads. And then you've got birds, so you could have said penguins, chickens, pigeons, okay? So I'd imagine you probably managed to think of an example for at least one or two groups, okay? How did you think of them? So how, by reading the word mammal, did you think, okay, a cat is a mammal? Okay, so in your heads, you would have automatically done this process. So if it's an animal you're unfamiliar with, you can use a diagram like this to know what group it would come under. So does it give birth to live young? So if it does, then it's probably a mammal, okay? And then you can double check whether that's right. Does it produce milk for its young, okay? One of the main features of mammals are that they produce milk to feed their young. Okay, so if it doesn't give birth to live young, okay, does it have wings? If it's yes, so when we say live young, um, if it's not live young, it's things like eggs, okay? So an egg isn't classed as live offspring, okay, because it develops outside of the animal's body. So, does it have wings? If the answer is yes, okay, it's probably a bird. And then you can check, does it lay eggs? Does it have a beak? If it's yes to all of those answers, then it's probably going to come under bird. If it doesn't have wings, does it have gills? If yes, okay, so gills are the things at the side of a fish's neck, okay, which allow them to breathe. So if you want to double check whether you've classified fish correctly, does it live underwater and does it lay eggs? Okay, so if you've said no, it doesn't have gills, does it have scales? If it does have scales, probably a reptile, so you can double check that. Does it lay eggs? Okay, reptiles lay eggs. If what you're looking at doesn't have scales, then it's probably an amphibian. Okay, so amphibians are things like toads, frogs. Okay, so you can ask, can it breathe in and out of water, and does it lay eggs? If it does, then you've probably found an amphibian. So let's have a little practice. So you've got your flow diagram here to help you. So let's have a look at this guy. He is a Komodo dragon. He lives on the island of Komodo, so he's a land animal. He breathes using lungs. It reproduces by laying eggs. And an interesting fact about Komodo dragons is that they can, female Komodo dragons can actually reproduce by themselves. Okay, so uh, we've got this pause symbol up here. What I want you to do is read through the facts that you've been given. Use this flow diagram to try and classify, okay, to group this Komodo dragon. Okay, so if you pause the slide now. Okay, so if we run through it before we go through the answer. So, does it give birth to live young? Well, it says here that it lays eggs. Okay, so we're going to answer no. Does it have wings? Well, let's have a look at this picture. We can't really see wings. And even if you hadn't been sure, does it have a beak? It doesn't have a beak there, okay? So that's going to be no. Does it have gills? Well, it says here it breathes using lungs, so it doesn't have gills, okay? So we're going to go for no there. Does it have scales? So let's have a look. You can actually see from the photo here that this animal does have scales, okay? So that leads us to think it's a reptile. Then we've got this double check here. Does it lay eggs? It says here that it reproduces by laying eggs. So our Komodo dragon is in fact a reptile, okay? So we'll try another one. So this is an axolotl. You can actually have them as pets. My sister used to have one. It lives in Mexican rivers or on the river banks themselves. So it breathes using gills and lungs, okay? So it can either live underwater or it can live on the riverbank. So it uses gills when it's under the water. When it's on the banks, it uses its lungs. It reproduces by laying eggs. And interesting fact about axolotls are that if they lose a limb, they can actually regrow them, okay? So what I want you to do is pause the slide now. Okay, so let's have a quick check. Does it give birth to live young? Well, it says here that it lays eggs, so that's going to be no. You can see from the picture it doesn't have wings, okay? Does it have gills? Well, it says here it has gills and lungs, okay? So you could say, is it a fish? Well, does it live underwater? Yes. Does it lay eggs? Yes. But it also has lungs as well. So if we say no, does it have scales? No. Amphibian. Can it breathe in and out of water? And does it lay eggs? Well, this animal can breathe in and out of water, okay, and it lives both in and out of water, and it does lay eggs. So an axolotl is actually an amphibian, okay? That's quite a tough one because if you'd gotten to here, you may have just automatically assumed it's a fish. But the key thing here was that it can also live on the riverbanks as well as under the water. Okay, so that was quite a tricky one. And we'll talk about what we can do in those situations in a second. So we've got the pause symbol again here. What I want you to do is read through these, okay, and then decide which one's false. Again, you don't have to write anything down, okay. You can just think about it in your head and then save the writing for later. So if you pause the slide now. Okay, what you should have had is that C was the false answer. So a frog is a reptile because it can live in and out of water. Well, actually, it's an amphibian because it can live in and out of water. If we have a look at the others, a tiger is a mammal because it produces milk for its young. Well, that's the key thing I said mammals do. Okay, a shark is a fish because it has gills. Yeah, they do at the side of the neck. They have gills, they don't have lungs. A penguin is a bird because it has wings and lays eggs. So penguins do have quite small wings, okay? They can't fly, but they do still have wings and they lay eggs, which leads us to C being the false answer. So what happens when an animal has features from several groups? So the axolotl has just shown us that some animals may have some features that fit into more than one group of animals, okay? So the axolotl had both lungs and gills, and it did live underwater, which from that flow diagram may have led us to think that it was a fish. So some animals may have many features that fit into different groups, okay? It's not always really clear cut about which group an animal should go into. So an example of this is the echidna and the platypus. We're going to have a look at these guys now. So this is a platypus. It lives both in water and on land. It lays eggs, it has lungs, it has fur, it has a beak, and it makes milk for its young. Okay, so if we have a look at this, it's got a beak. A beak and it lays eggs. So those are key things for a bird, okay? But this animal also lives underwater. So when an animal lives in water and on land, you may think it's an amphibian. The key thing here, though, the most defining thing is that it makes milk for its young. So although a platypus has qualities that could put it as an amphibian, could put it as a bird, it's actually classed as a mammal, okay? And this is an echidna. It lives on land, it lays eggs, it has lungs, it has fur and spines like a hedgehog, it has a beak, it makes milk for its young. Okay, so again, this may be a bit confusing because it's got a beak and it lays eggs. Again, those are things that class it as a bird, but it doesn't have wings, and most importantly, it makes milk for its young. So an echidna is a mammal. Okay, so the most important thing, if things have different features that could put it into different groups, are to find the most important thing. So generally, well, all the time, if it makes milk for its young, it's going to be a mammal, okay? Regardless of any of its other features. So we just discussed some of the problems. So you can see this pause symbol. What I want you to do, either have a chat with someone in the room or just have a think. 10 seconds. What are some problems with this classification system we have? Okay, so if you pause the slide now. Okay, so you could have said not all animals fit into the definitions of each groups, like some of the ones we've discussed. This can make it difficult to classify certain species. We therefore can't define animals solely on their visual characteristics. Okay, so we start to go then by genetic stuff. Okay, so it's not just how they look. We can't classify everything just by how they look. Okay, so we're going to really quickly recap the most basic things we've learnt this lesson. So what are the 5 groups of animal classes? Okay, so vertebrate classes. And what are the features of each group? Okay, so this is going to be a slightly longer recap, okay, because you're trying to think of the features of each group. But have a think. You don't have to write them down. Okay, so I've missed out the pause symbol off this slide. So if you just pause the slide now. Okay, so what you should have had are the 5 groups are mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, amphibians. Okay, and the features of each group so mammals give birth to live young and produce milk. Birds have beaks, lay eggs, and have wings. Fish have gills, they live underwater and they lay eggs. Reptiles, they have scales and they lay eggs, okay, but they live on land. And then we've got amphibians, which can breathe in and out of water, so they can live either in water or out of water, and they lay eggs, okay. So our writing phase. So this pause symbol, we normally spend 10 to 15 minutes in lessons on this. So feel free to pause this, go back in the video, use the flow diagram, this flow diagram here as much as you want when answering your questions, okay? So if you pause it and then we'll go through answers. So pause it for about 15 minutes now. Okay, so let's go through some answers. So what you should have had, describe the meaning of vertebrates and invertebrates. So a vertebrate is an animal with a spinal cord. An invertebrate is an animal without a spinal cord. The 5 groups of vertebrates are mammals, fish, birds, amphibians, and reptiles. So it doesn't matter what order you've written them down in, as long as you've got all 5. If you haven't, add them in green pen now. So working at the main features, okay, I realise there's a lot of writing here because there's a lot of features for each of the groups. So the main features of mammals are that they give birth to live young and that they produce milk. The main features of birds are that they have wings, a beak, and that they lay eggs. The main features of fish are that they have gills, they live underwater, and they lay eggs. The main feature of reptiles, they have scales, they lay eggs, okay, but they're land animals. The main features of amphibians that they lay eggs, they can breathe in and out of water, okay? So make sure you're adding in any extra information that you've missed. Okay, so penguins are classified as birds because they have wings and lay eggs, okay? They've also got beaks. Kangaroos are classified as mammals because they give birth to live young and produce milk for their offspring. Lions, again, they're mammals because they give birth to live young, produce milk. Sharks are classed as fish because they have gills and they lay eggs. Toads, they're amphibians, so they can live in and out of water. They don't have scales and they lay eggs. And then we've got turtles, which are classified as reptiles because they have scales and they lay eggs. And then for working beyond plus, echidna and platypus are both animals that lay eggs and have beaks. This would indicate that they should be classified as a bird. However, they don't have wings and they produce milk for their young. Therefore, they're classed as mammals. This suggests that although classification system is useful for grouping animals with similar features, there are exceptions. This means that not every animal fits the whole criteria for each group. Okay? So, let's write our sentence for today. Today I achieved. You put the word of the grade you got to. So if you did the yellow task today, I've achieved views, and make sure you put that reason down to say why it is you've achieved that. Okay, what you've actually learned from doing this lesson. So if you do that now. And now that you've done the written phase and everything, if you go on to show my homework and do the 10 question multiple choice quiz, okay, and then you're all done. So thank you for watching Year 7. I hope you're all well. I hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you for lesson 4.